At the start of this week, we may feel like we want to take action, but we're needing to be a bit more fluid, a bit more flexible, because Mars will be moving into Sagittarius. And that's not putting a halt on Mars at all, but it's saying that we need some degree of flexibility, and the action that we want to take needs to be more informed action based on what we've learnt, what we've discovered with that Sag energy, rather than a reactive type energy. It will feel a bit slower because more planets are going to be in retrograde mode, okay? We've already got two big hitters, Neptune and Saturn. They're currently in retrograde in Pisces, as we know, working together as a task team. But we've also got Uranus in retrograde. And this week, it's quite pivotal for Uranus because he is going to move back into Taurus. So he's going to cover old ground in Taurus. And whilst doing that as well, he's going to hover over that cusp point, which I've been talking about in previous astrology videos on YouTube. So this is about endings and beginnings, and it's a further reminder of closing out cycles. So of course, going back into Taurus, he is going to cover old ground in Taurus, and there's aspects that we need to look at as part of that, and I'll come on to that later. But we've also got Mercury stationing retrograde on the weekend, and then the early part of next week, Jupiter will station retrograde in Cancer. So the energy will feel like it's slowing down, but it's more of a pause. It's not a stagnation. It's more of a pause because these retrogrades offer valuable periods of introspection, and we need to have that time to allow things to come up for us to process and for us to understand why things have happened the way they have. What have we learned from those experiences? So this week is just that. We're learning a lot from what is coming up and what's being revealed, in addition to what already has been revealed, of course, from this year, which has felt slightly chaotic and a bit of a roller coaster, energetically wise. And I'm sure many of you listening to this will resonate with that because there's been a lot of cycle closeouts, a lot of revelations, a lot of illuminations. It's all for our highest good, of course. So let's dial it back. Start of the week. On the 4th of November, for us in the UK, certainly on GMT, we've got Mars moving into Sagittarius, and I alluded to this a bit before. So Mars wants to take action. He rules Aries, which is a cardinal sign. It's about getting things going. It's having that drive to take action with courage and that masculine determination. In Sagittarius, that's of course mutable energy. So there's a softening to that, and it becomes more of an inspired action than a reactive action. So, of course, we're wanting to do certain things, get things done. We may feel like there's some pressure around us to do that. But this is about being more fluid and flexible with the energy and allowing the energy of Sag, so the journey that we're on, the quest that we're on, to show us what we need to see in order for us to then understand and determine the action that we want to take. Now, of course, through taking action in whatever way, we are learning as we're doing that as well. So it is a two-way approach. We are learning and discovering a lot from the action that we've already taken and that which we will be taking. But if we're dealing with the present moment, we need to understand what we've learned up to this point in order to drive us forward for the action that we're wanting to take. So that is the energy going on with Mars. And of course, you know, looking at the chart, there is stuff going on in the charts as there is all throughout the week with the astrological aspects. And we've got, you know, a couple of days after that, Venus, so the feminine to Mars's masculine, Venus is going to be moving into Scorpio. So she's going to make her ingress into the sign of Scorpio and ask us to go deep when it comes to Venus values, our worth, and of course those inner resources that we have. But understanding we need to do a bit of an honest investment audit where we're investing our time, our energy, our attention. And that could be fueled somewhat from what Mars in Sag is showing us. It could also inform the action that we're going to take so we can allow the energy to work together in that balanced, harmonious way. What's really interesting is we've got this full moon in Taurus sandwiched in between Mars and Venus making their moves. You know, this full moon is popping up in the middle. So for us in the UK, it's happening on the 5th, but For some people in the world, it will be the 6th of November. So we've got this happening, and it's going to illuminate a lot when it comes to our physical reality, Taurus, but also when it comes to our comfort zone, and shining a bit of a spotlight on worth and values, shining a bit of a spotlight on inner resources, and the recognition that maybe we've been holding ourselves back in terms of the reality that we are trying to carve out for ourselves. Maybe because we've not believed we can create that. Maybe we've not understood we've got those resources within us. Maybe we've not understood the memo of Venus with the values and getting them aligned with our soul's truth, and recognizing that worth plays a massive part here. But also, if we're investing our time, our energy, our money, our love, our attention in multiple places that are not serving us, that's also going to impact our physical reality. Now, Taurus, there is a very material essence to Taurus because it is the physical reality, and we are living in a material world, and don't we know that? So we're having to navigate this. But there's a recognition here also that there is something about a comfort zone versus the idea of risk, and not a reckless risk, more of a calculated, measured risk, because it's based on what we're trying to create. We want to feel comfortable, we want to feel stable, we want to feel secure, but with things changing all around us, it can feel unsettling. So we hold on to what is familiar. And by doing that, of course, we're not allowing ourselves to be open to the change that we're actually wanting to experience. So it might not feel like that at the time. We might just be, let's just stay in this zone. It's familiar, it's comfortable. This is my reality. This is what I've always known. I feel safe here. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it can be a bit of a false comfort blanket, because where we're being encouraged to step out of our comfort zone, to not only expand ourselves, but to elevate in consciousness, this is the moment where we do need to take a bit of a chance on ourselves and a bit of a risk towards that adventure that we're trying to seek, metaphorically speaking. So the full moon in Taurus, because full moons illuminate, there could be more clarity coming in around that, how that plays out for you in your situation, if it does at all, of course. But also the need to be grounded in what we're doing. We are, of course, in Scorpio season, which is the opposite sign to Taurus. And that's why we have the full moon in Taurus. We're in Scorpio season. The sun and the moon are in direct opposition at that point. So this is what brings the illumination, but it can also highlight the resistance, the push-pull between the soul essence of wanting that depth and maybe a little bit of risk, and the emotional home that wants to stay in the comfort zone with the full moon in Taurus. Okay, so multiple things could be coming up that pertain to the physical reality. Now, there is a yod in the full moon chart, which is a finger of God, and it will point its apex towards a planet or a planetary body, and that is the area of focus. And at the base, you will have two other planetary bodies, okay, making up that yod. It's formed of a sextile and two quincunxes, and Venus is actually at the apex point of this yod in the full moon chart, which is interesting because not long after the full moon, Venus will ingress into Scorpio. So there is absolute emphasis and focus on our Venus values, on our worth, our self-worth, and believing that we can create what we want to create. But not only that, that we have the resources within us to do that, to feel empowered to do that as well. Okay, so it's recognizing that we've got that gift within us to do that. It just might take a bit of risk, taking a chance on ourselves. Okay, and that message actually comes along later in the week as well. It's sort of heightened by Mercury stationing retrograde in Sag, because yes, he will be stationing in retrograde, folks. If you want to find out how this full moon could be impacting your natal chart and how you can work with the energy in the best way possible, my Goddess of Neptune MoonScopes are available, and the first 10 to book with me will receive them at a special discounted rate. Plus, you will get your MoonScope as a video reading and not a written horoscope. So if you want to take advantage of this fantastic offer, check out the details below. And I look forward to working with you and helping you navigate this full moon energy. I know that Mercury retrograde gets a bad rep, but all retrogrades are valuable periods of introspection, and Mercury is just the same. It's just that with Mercury retrograde, technology and travel things can happen, okay? The energy can feel quite clunky. But we've been in pre-shadow phase for a couple of weeks now, so it could have already felt like that for you. However, recognize that, Mercury in Sag, that is the opposite sign. And Mercury rules Gemini, so Sag is the opposite sign. So again, there can be some resistance to being a bit more open when it comes to our thoughts or how we communicate with ourselves and other people, our expression, Mercury. So that also might be some kind of like resistance holding us back that we need to look at. The full moon could illuminate that for us as well, because it's part of the comfort zone aspect that I was just talking about. Venus values might show us that, because again, if we don't believe in ourselves enough, we might be more aligned with sticking to the logical approach rather than taking a chance on communicating. But one of the messages that I really felt from this was about not only expanding our thoughts and opening up our communication on our path, on our journey with that Sag energy, recognizing that everything we're doing has purpose. We're learning from it all. That's part of the Sag quest. But this is about bigging up ourselves, because Sag energy can be very motivational and inspirational. So the Mercury retrograde might actually be asking us during this valuable period of introspection, are you championing yourself enough when it comes to your path, when it comes to speaking up for what you want? Are you doing that for you, or are you just doing it for other people? So there's also a bit of a spotlight on us with this, because, Sagittarius, motivational, inspirational. Are we motivating ourselves on our path? Or are we taking our time? So our Venus values, are we investing our time in championing other people, but not championing ourselves in terms of what we want to do, where we want to speak up, and the very essence of our expression? So there's recognition of this. Now, also with Mercury, when we think of expression, we can express ourselves in many ways. It can be, verbally, we can communicate. There's our thought process as well. And there's also the written form of communication. So journaling might be a really, really valuable thing to do during this Mercury retrograde, because it's journaling, communicating, expressing the thoughts, even if there's some fears and patterns within that, it's allowing it to come out onto the page. It's expressing it. And then using what that is teaching us, Sag energy, to motivate and inspire us to make the necessary changes. So that could be a very valuable exercise. And of course, notwithstanding the grounding exercises we can do from the Taurus energy that's coming up with the full moon, and also Uranus retrograding back into Taurus as part of his retrograde, which I'm going to cover very shortly. But do you see where I'm coming from with that? It's about opening up our expression. And yes, we need the logic. We do need the logic of Gemini. We do need to have that curiosity and the desire to investigate, to really look into things, to analyze. But there can be over analyzing. So Sag is just saying, let's take a chance on this, and we're going to learn from it regardless. So it is about being free, feeling free to speak up as part of the journey and to express ourselves with an element of adventure. Okay, and that's kind of metaphorical, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from with it. It's about recognizing that if we feel we want to express ourselves, why hold ourselves back? So really understanding the message there of the Mercury retrograde as part of all of this, and the Sag energy that's coming into play, because of course, Mars moving into Sag at the beginning of the week, and then at the weekend, Mercury stationing retrograde in Sag. And then, of course, towards the end of November, I think it's the 22nd, the sun will ingress into Sag. So we're building up to Sagittarius season. We're building up to the season of the archer with the bow and arrow who is shooting that bow in the direction of what he or she wants, based on an element of risk, adventure, wanting to learn, wanting to discover. So if we can inspire ourselves in that way and big ourselves up and motivate ourselves to move forward, that is going to inspire the action we take. That is going to inform our worth and values and where we want to invest our energy. And it's also going to allow us to recognize what patterns we might still need to close out, detach from. Okay, it's all part of the bigger picture. Now, I mentioned Uranus, and Uranus, the planet of change, he is going to be retrograding back into Taurus on the weekend as well. He's going to move back into Taurus and cover old ground. He's been in retrograde in Gemini, and of course that allows us to look at change from different perspectives and to apply that logic and the curiosity to look at what does need to change, and also to accept where change has had to happen. But there's been more of an analytical essence to it, and very technological as well. When you think of Uranus ruling Aquarius, of course, Pluto being in Aquarius, there's lots of technological advances at the moment. So there has been major change in that. And perhaps we've had to adapt our own situations to accommodate that. So that's been part of the process, Uranus and Gemini as well. But moving back into Taurus, of course, going over that cusp point, endings and beginnings. So entering Taurus and then saying, okay, change is coming. Change is needed in our physical reality. So how are we going to pivot and adjust to this? Do we need to understand where we have been tied to our comfort zone and where we need to extract ourselves from that to have a bit of risk, a bit of adventure? Or even just acknowledging the patterns that kept us in our comfort zone for so long? Do we need to look at stability, security, and really understand that in order to create the change that Uranus is wanting, we have to be comfortable with where we've come from and where we're going, and recognize that we create our own stability and security. It's to do with the physical reality. It's to do with the material world. So yes, of course, it's quite challenging sometimes to think, okay, my spiritual integrity is showing me a lot. I'm connecting to my intuition. I know the change that's needed. And then applying it in the physical reality can be quite challenging because we have to navigate this material world. There is, I say sympathy, but not in a patronizing way. But from the cosmos, there is sympathy that we're down here navigating this 3D. But there is absolutely a shift in perspective that's needed when it comes to the stability and security that we can provide for ourselves. If we can ground ourselves, be present and understand what needs to change, understand the patterns we need to overcome, and so on. Taurus, that energy itself knows what it likes, knows what it wants, and we can get comfortable with that. So change can be an absolute, wow, okay, I don't know if I can adjust to that. It's about making the pivots that we are comfortable to make, but to make the pivots, because the Sag energy is going to be calling for that. And remember, that's a journey. By making those pivots, it's an experience. We learn from it. Saturn is teaching us lessons to get us aligned with our soul's truth. Neptune is lifting the veil and helping us to awaken to these truths that are deep within for a lot of people. So there might be patterns coming up from the past or even past lives that explain why we want to hold on to a false comfort blanket and not take a chance on ourselves. Okay? We need to be kind to ourselves through this process. And that brings me on to my next point. Because at the early part of next week, on the 11th of November for us in the UK on GMT, Jupiter will station retrograde in Cancer. So Jupiter will join the retrograde season. And Jupiter is a major expansive force. In retrograde, this is all about inner growth, inner expansion. And through all of the lessons that we're undertaking and what we're closing out, what we're detaching from, what we're releasing, inner growth is happening, even if it doesn't feel like it. So Jupiter can bring that reward of the luck and the fortune. There is hope to Jupiter. It's very benefic energy. And what I feel, because of the Pisces connection, because of course Jupiter was the original ruler of Pisces before Neptune was discovered, Jupiter can bring spiritual enlightenment through this retrograde period. So everything that we're learning and discovering through Sag, and of course Jupiter is the modern day ruler of Sag, so there is the Pisces-Sag connection there. It's mutable energy. Everything we're learning from that flow state, from our soul's truth, and what we're experiencing and learning and discovering from the quest is allowing us to open, to expand on an internal level. That growth is happening. The wisdom is being received, and we're becoming more spiritually enlightened. And as a result, we can then motivate ourselves more, inspire ourselves more, and inspire other people. But what I will say with Jupiter in Cancer, because that's the retrograde happening, Cancer is obviously very nurturing, motherly energy. So as cheesy as it sounds, self-love, self-care is a major part of this process. We need to nurture ourselves through this change, through these pivots, through these shifts, because that's what allows us to understand the patterns coming up. By being gentle with ourselves through the process and not being full pelt, action, action, action. Yes, there is a time and a place for that. Absolutely. We do need to take action towards our dreams and towards our path. But this is about acknowledging the retrograde period. And remember, this is about the pause moments for the inner reflection, because it's introspection, and acknowledging that. So not being stagnant with it. Okay. Still recognizing what's coming up, processing it, dealing with it. That allows us to gain an enormous amount of wisdom. But to do that, we have to hold space for ourselves through that process and recognize what's coming up, what's being revealed, why it's coming up, what it's teaching us, and what it's showing us. Because that's going to enable us to move forward in a more aligned way. So there is a lot going on in the astrology of the week of the 3rd of November. And yes, energy is fluid. It's always moving. We have got potentiality all of the time, windows of opportunity, doors of opportunity. And of course, looking at the transits of the events I've mentioned against your own natal chart is going to give you a much better idea of how the energy could be playing out for yourself. But remember, we've always got free will in this reality. We've got the gift of free will. So astrology can give you the potentiality based on the transits, based on your natal chart aspects. But free will overrides it all because we are in this 3D reality. And we need to discover and learn things. And our soul often knows what we need to learn and discover and will guide us if we're tuned into that. Remember, Neptune and Saturn are currently testing our intuitive capabilities in Pisces within their retrogrades. North Node is in Pisces. So that's the path at the moment to really trust the inner compass within our intuition. And the energy this week, yes, there is a bit of push-pull because we've got the Sag energy, and certainly with Mercury, Mercury rules Gemini and the opposite sign is Sag, and that's where the retrograde is happening. So there's going to be push-pull because we're being encouraged to step out of our comfort zone, to take a chance on ourselves. And that might be something we've never done because we've stayed in the comfort zone. But it is about the reward that comes from the risk. And I'll remind you, calculated, measured risk. Okay, this is about the inspired action that we take as a result of what we've learned, as a result of the wisdom that we've gained so far. That's what's going to guide us forward in terms of the action that we need to take on our own path at the pace we need to take it. We're all on our own journeys. With the full moon coming up, working with the lunar energy to release cycles where we have inhibited ourselves in terms of our own physical reality, where we recognize we need to step out of the comfort zone to take a chance on ourselves, but also to understand there's a groundedness here. So it might have just simply been showing us all this time that we haven't grounded ourselves enough in the reality that we want to create. It could be that we've not believed in ourselves enough. And now it's time to change because our values have changed and we recognize what is important to us and what isn't. So values pivot. Our Venus investments need to pivot as a result. Our time and our energy is extremely valuable. So investing those resources in that which brings us joy. We've just come from Libra season. So reciprocity. We want that balance. We want that fairness. So this is now moving forward with depth and honesty because we're in Scorpio season. There is a rawness to Scorpio, the honesty. But because Pluto rules Scorpio, this is about profound rebirth. We've got to go to those places that might feel uncomfortable in order to regenerate ourselves. It's about the phoenix rising from the ashes and leaving what is gone there. It's done. It's gone. It's about propelling ourselves forward, taking the wisdom forward as well, but of course, moving forward in the direction that's aligned with our truth. So all of these aspects are here to teach us something. And how that might resonate for you is going to be different to somebody else, if it resonates at all. Okay. But if it does, you're going to be feeling it and you may already be aware of where you need to take a chance on yourself, to believe in yourself more, to champion yourself on your path. Okay. So, of course, I'm sending you all the best for this upcoming week. The full moon in Taurus being one of the highlights, and the retrograde activity that is, of course, following. Recognizing that we're still in this 9-year and it is about releasing. It is about cycle closeouts. And we've seen that a lot with the planetary movements over the cusp point. Uranus is going to do the same. He's going to remind us that we do need to close things out. And maybe we just need to revisit some old stuff that relates to our physical reality, our comfort zone, our security, our stability, our resources, our worth and value. Revisit that so that we know what we can take from that and then close out what we need to close out in order to move forward. Okay, with that element of calculated risk through inspiration and motivation of what we're trying to achieve on our path going forward. So I'm sending you all the best for this week ahead. So thank you for being here for this podcast episode. I hope you found it valuable and insightful. Don't forget to like and subscribe and also leave a comment if you like in terms of what you think of what I've discussed and if there's any topics you would like me to cover on a future podcast episode. Please also feel free to share this with anyone you feel might benefit from the podcast content. It helps me get the message out there to more of the collective, so thank you. I truly appreciate you being here and I will catch you on the next episode.